Hello and welcome to the 1/160th of a second photography podcast season 2. Should be in episode 79 now. I explained in my last episode how I'm doing the seasons. Just because of a bit of a break, it felt like a good time to call it season 2. It feels different, so let's call it season 2. Today I'm going to be talking about infrared photography. Where this inspiration for infrared photography came from was just the weather. At the moment in the UK, I think we're sitting through the hottest August on record. It's incredibly hot, and I was out doing portrait shoots and the lighting was terrible because the sun's so high, really harsh light. And while that light is terrible for portraits, it's brilliant for infrared photography. I'll talk a bit later about why it's brilliant for infrared photography. Infrared photography is not something you want to do in the winter, although you can do it any time. Infrared photography is for that time when the sun is highest, it's beating down, it's incredibly hot. That's when it's the best time for infrared photography. When we do photography, we capture light on a piece of film or on a digital sensor. And it's light that is converted into a digital signal or pieces of silver. Although for colour photography, I don't know that it is silver. But anyway, I'm not going to go there. I'm not sure what the particulates are in colour photography. But in black and white, it's bits of silver. In infrared photography, you're capturing infrared radiation rather than light radiation. And they behave pretty much the same. Infrared has a slightly longer wavelength than light. If you go the other way, from light you get ultraviolet, which of course can be photographed. Well, ultraviolet won't show up in photography. Well, actually, I say that. In film, you used to use UV filters to cut out UV because it could show up on film. However, it doesn't really show up on digital, hence why you don't really need a UV filter for digital photography. However, you can irradiate something with UV light, and if a certain dye is present, it will give out illumination. So you can have things like phosphorescence and luminescence, and that is caused by whatever's being photographed being subjected to UV light. And certain chemicals will give out visible light when they absorb ultraviolet light. It's a bit of chemistry for you there. So infrared photography just picks up, well, infrared is heat really, but it just picks up different radiation to our standard photography. You can test to see if your camera does this by you get a TV remote control and you hold the button down and you photograph the emitter. And some cameras will work and you'll be able to see it, and some cameras won't work. It tends to be older cameras that work better. So if you are going to take up infrared photography or give it a go, just test your camera out by turning on the TV while pointing at your camera and taking a picture, and you'll be able to see if it works. Your camera can pick up infrared radiation, but it's almost no use at all because it's designed to pick up light radiation. So the light radiation will just wash over any infrared radiation. So if you're doing photography and you're doing IR photography, you need to get rid of the visible light. So there's two ways you can do that. You can have your camera converted, but that costs a lot of money. And once it's converted, that's it. It's an infrared camera. Or you can just put an IR filter over the front of the lens, which is what I do. Now, both have consequences. So autofocus is calibrated for light, but infrared photography has different wavelengths. So your autofocus would be out. However, sort of doesn't matter because you're cutting out so much light when you put that filter on your lens that it's too dark to autofocus anyway. So if you put something on your lens like a filter, an IR filter, and they're not expensive and you don't need the best one in the world. You get a £7 one will do, and you can get ones that have different strengths, of course. Just get a basic one if you're going to try it. Put it on your lens. You'll need to do manual focusing, or you'll probably need to take it off. And you're going to need a tripod as well because you're going to need a long exposure. So what you do is you put your camera on a tripod and you autofocus on where you want it to focus, and then you switch it to manual focus. Then you put on the filter and then you take the picture, and your exposure time will be seconds rather than fractions of seconds because there's more light around than IR radiation, and you're cutting out all that light. It's going to take longer to gather the required radiation to give a correct exposure. Or let's talk about the other way, converting your camera. If you convert a camera, that filter that you would have put on your lens actually goes inside the camera. And I think you can pay companies to do this, and they just put the filter inside the camera And I think they adjust the autofocus as well, or they can adjust the autofocus. But then once that's done, you can't ever go back to sort of light photography because your camera's set up for IR. So occasionally on eBay, you'll see a camera that's been configured for infrared photography. And you can do it yourself, but I think particularly if you're dipping your toe in the field, just for versatility, just put a filter on your lens. So what do the images look like in infrared photography? Well, it's almost like it's inverted from what you would expect. Things that reflect infrared photography are whiter than things that don't. So infrared photography has uses. So plant life will reflect infrared radiation. So plants and leaves in particular are designed to absorb light because they use light for photosynthesis. And that's how they create their food, and that's how we get oxygen due to photosynthesis. They also respire, but I'm not going to go into plant biology today. They also respire like all living things, but I'm not going to go into plant biology today. So there's no need for infrared radiation, so they've not been designed to absorb infrared radiation, and it gets reflected. If you take a picture of a tree with light radiation, the leaves are going to be green and they're going to be dark compared to, say, the sky. However, the other way around, using infrared radiation, the leaves are going to be reflecting radiation, and there's not going to be much in the sky. I mean, obviously the radiation comes from the sky, from the sun, but it's not going to be as much as reflected off leaves. So the leaves look white and the sky looks dark, and everything sort of has this ethereal quality to it. Now, infrared photography is used to sort of from satellites to work out plant coverage and other things like that. And I said you get a black and white image. Well, you don't get a black and white image. You get an image that has a color cast from the filter you use. So you'll get a purple image, and you will have shades of purple going from pretty much white to full purple, and that's your range. But you don't want a purple image, so all you do is you convert it to black and white, and it's easy in software. You could even do it in camera, just convert it to black and white. There's no point in having a purple photograph, it wouldn't look very good. Going out and doing sort of cityscapes, you'll get these trees that look white, and you'll get buildings that look dark, and you'll get really odd things. Don't forget you're filtering the radiation that comes into your camera, so you will need longer to get an exposure. But that has benefits. So water will be still and won't have ripples in because you're doing exposures of seconds rather than fractions of seconds. And it is a good experiment. So the last time I went out and did infrared photography, I did it on a Canon EOS M, I think the original. I bought that camera really cheap, and it was a great little travel camera, and I used the M mount lenses for it. I think I just used the M mount kit lens because that was a very good metal kit lens. And I did some infrared photography around Canary Wharf, and the water was still, and I got some really, really good images I was really happy with. But I haven't done it since. It's not a way of photographing people, although if you do it photographing people, it's really for medical purposes, because I think it shows up tanning things and skin damage. But no, you wouldn't do it with people. You do it with landscapes. And it's almost like when the lighting's so bad for a landscape photo that you think, oh, I'm not doing any landscape photography, the lighting's so bad, that's the time to switch to infrared photography. Because when it's terrible for normal photography, it's great for infrared photography. Don't think infrared photography is what you see in sort of night vision and things like that. It does have a beautiful quality. It does have an unexpected look. It does stop and make you think. And it is a good way to go for photography. I really like it. But you need a tripod, you need a filter. But I would recommend giving infrared photography a go, particularly in the summertime when maybe you're not going to get the images you want. Do let me know what you think. Thank you.